thing, it starts off by setting an objective. Like this one, you can see that here DHL, they said by 2025 would like to deliver excellence in a digital world. And as you know, this is a goal, this is an objective. And we said these objectives, there is uncertainty in meeting that objective. We don't know for certain by 2025 will this objective be achieved or not being achieved. So what do we need to do? What we need to do here, we need guidelines, okay? And if you come to the introduction here, okay, I'm going to show you something for the reference, okay? And the reason why I'm going to be giving you these references and so on is because I'd like you also to use these documents afterwards. So as you can see, this is ISO 31000. So this is used by people who create and protect value in organizations, okay, by managing risk, making decisions, and setting objectives and improving performance. So that means DHL here, they are going to look for guidelines. They need to increase the likelihood of achieving this objective, okay? So how are they going to do it? The first thing DHL is going to do is to determine a process. They need a process to identify what can help them and what can affect their objective so that they can allocate resources for treatment. That means they are going to identify threats and opportunities under these categories. They are going to look at this objective of delivering excellence in a digital world, and they are going to determine what can negatively affect that goal under legal, environmental, operational, financial, and reputational, and what are the opportunities they can seize so that they can have insignificant risk under legal, environmental, operational, financial, and reputational. Operational, this is going to cover information security, business continuity, health and safety, and so on. So this is now enterprise risk management. So as you can see now, that is how the opportunities and threats are identified. And the resources, they are going to be allocated for risk treatment, which is basically what you're going to do. If they identify operational risk, this is the module they are going to use. If they have financial risk, project risk, if they have supply chain risk, if they've got information security risk, the treatment solutions they are going to get from these modules. So this is now the same way that I'm going to show you how that can be done in an organization. Organizations, they need to increase the likelihood of achieving this objective. So in order to increase the likelihood here, they are going to follow the principles. So I'm going to show you how risk management principles can be used to increase the likelihood of achieving the objectives, and how can the risk management process be used to identify threats and opportunities and to allocate resources for risk treatment. So with that being said, now we are going to come back here. We said, why do we need risk management? Why do you think DHL, they need risk management? They need risk management because they have a corporate objective. In delivering excellence in a digital world, they need to address the volatility of this objective. They need to address the uncertainty of this objective. They need to address the ambiguity for this objective. They also need to address the complexity of this objective. And this is all through, these are the fundamentals of risk management even before ISO 31000. So in response to this VUC8 model, ISO developed these guidelines. So these guidelines that you see here, this is where we are today. This has gone multiple revisions until the latest version of 2018. The reason why I showed you the VUCA concept is because this is true, like whenever there's an objective, there are threats and opportunities, and basically any risk management effort that you're going to do should be able to address these four factors. So I thought they said, okay, we are going to help you address the volatility, uncertainty, and ambiguity by giving you the principles, okay? What is the role of the principles? The principles, these are going to guide you and show you the characteristics, the features of value creation and protection. What is value creation and protection? Value creation and protection, it means achieving an objective. If by 2025, DHL, they achieve this objective, they have created value, okay? So what are the 8 factors that are going to determine whether this value is going to be created or protected? These are the 8 factors that you see here, and these are the risk management principles. So that means these principles, they exist and they affect any organization, including your organization, whether you know it or you don't know it. The reason why you are creating value or the reason why you don't create value can be traced back the root cause to these 8 factors. So this is going to be the first thing that you need to know. You need to know what are the characteristics of a risk. They're basically giving you the conditions, okay, or the prerequisites, the environment, okay, what you have to do in your organization when in order to implement or to adopt and integrate these principles. That is done by the framework, so that this process right here can exist. Okay. So the other way to view these guidelines, these principles, the principles, they help you to increase the likelihood of achieving the objectives. Okay. And then this framework right here is going to help you improve. Okay. It's going to improve the way you manage risk. This process here, that is the step of identifying opportunities and threats and to effectively allocate your resources for risk treatment. So that is basically how ISO 31000 works. And in order for you to understand, to have a relationship between the past and the present, this is what ISO said. ISO, they said, the long-term success of an organization relies on many things. That means from continually assessing and updating what they offer and optimizing their processes. And if this was not enough of a challenge, they also need to take account of unexpected in managing risk. Because of this reason, that is why they've developed ISO 31000. In other words, ISO 31000 was developed to help you assess and update your product and services, to assess and update your product and service realization, to assess and update how you provide your product or your services, and also for you to address the unexpected in managing risk, which is basically the uncertainty and the ambiguity. So that is the relationship that you really have to understand, that, okay, after all has been said and done, my job here as a risk manager is basically to record and report, okay, that uncertainty in meeting these objectives, and you are going to use these ISO 31000 guidelines. That is basically how it works. So what we are going to do right now, I'm going to start off by explaining the principles. Remember, your job as a risk manager is to record and report. So what I'm going to do, I will go to these guidelines, okay? I will go to the principles. I will give you an overview, an explainer. What are these principles? And then we go back to the presentation, and then I can show you how to look at those principles in the organization. So these are the principles, okay? So the purpose of risk management is creation and protection of value. So again, I'm going to tell you what does it mean to create and protect value. To create and protect value is to achieve an objective. For example, let's say we are in 2025. We have got 2 scenarios. One section of the organization one organization has achieved this objective, another they have not achieved that objective. Which one is more valuable here? Of course, the organization that has achieved the objective is valuable. That is creation and protection of value. But however, what determines whether value is created and protected, and what determines whether this goal has been achieved or not? And then, because of history, because of the information that we have since the 1920s in risk management, these principles, they are going to provide the guidance on the characteristics of effective and efficient risk management, okay? So in other words, what I'm going to show you here, I will show you the characteristics or the features of a good and efficient risk management. That means risk management in this sense, we are talking of the process that is used to identify the threats and opportunities and the allocation of risk treatment. So that is these principles that we are going to look at. So these principles, you might ask, why do I need them? These principles, they are very fundamental, they are very important, so that you can determine the maturity model of the organization, the maturity model for the framework, and then the process that is your job as a risk manager. As a risk manager, your job is to what? When you are using ISO 31000, you have to compare the risk management practices in an organization with the sound principles, so that you can tell us whether the organization's maturity model, is it underdeveloped or it is optimized. You do that by looking for these characteristics, which I'm going to show you right now. So the first thing that you're going to do now as a risk manager is to identify the principles. You have to understand what is the principles, why do we need them. So the principles, these are the characteristics, okay? This is basically what you see in an organization that is en route to create and protect value. These principles, this is what you see in improved performance, in innovation, and basically the achievement of objectives. When you are looking at these principles, you might view them as the factors that increase the likelihood of achieving an objective. Okay, these are the characteristics that you need to see in an effective and efficient risk management program, a risk management process. So these are the factors that determine value creation and protection. And one more time before we proceed, what is value creation and protection? Value creation, it is basically the achievement of an objective. That is the simplest way to put it. If you achieve this objective, you have created and protected value. But what are the factors to be considered? What is going to increase this likelihood of achieving this objective? What is going to increase the likelihood of achieving that objective, thus creating and protecting value? These are the 8 factors. So you, as a risk manager, what you should know the characteristics of these features, so that you can inform the organization on the maturity, on how well the risk management is doing in regards to the framework, and the process is basically looking for these characteristics. So we are going to start off in no particular order, from the integration, structured and comprehensive, customized, and so on and so on. And in each principle, I'm going to show you how does that principle help you create and protect value. And number 2, what are the characteristics or the features or evidence to determine that indeed this principle has been considered in the identification of threats and opportunities and the effective allocation of resources. So we are going to start off with principle number 1 out of 8 for integrated. Now, when we are looking at these principles, one thing I would like you to really understand off the go is like, where exactly are you going to look for these characteristics here? Okay, because these are the characteristics and this is the description of that principle. So these characteristics right here, you are going to look at them when you are looking at the framework and the process that is used to identify the threats and opportunities for risk treatment. For those who have something like this in your organization, you can actually start looking for those principles here. There should be evidence that this is integrated. You are using best available information. It is customized. Okay, there's continual improvement. Okay, there's inclusiveness. All those principles, they have to be found here. That is going to give you a confirmation and confidence that indeed this risk management process and framework is en route to create and protect value. That will give you evidence that indeed the risk management framework and process is optimized, okay, or it is underdeveloped or formalized, which we are going to report here. So we are going to start by looking at the concept of integrated. What really should be integrated here? What should be integrated is the risk management framework and the risk management process. Okay, so here is the risk management framework and here is the risk management process. So when you are going to look at integration, that means this whole process here and its components, each one of these components in the framework, they have to be integrated. And each one of these steps in the process, they have to be integrated. The same is true for being structured, customized, and like that. So your job here as a risk manager is to look, when you are looking at the framework under design, you have to look for evidence of those characteristics. Is this integrated? The way you design your risk management process, is it structured and comprehensive? Is it customized? Is it inclusive? Is it dynamic? When you are looking at the risk management process in an organization, are you using best available information? Do you consider human and cultural factors? Are you dynamic? Are you continuous? And then you report that, okay? So integration, basically this is a principle that helps an organization across all the levels. Now, how do I know whether the risk management process and the framework is integrated? What are the characteristics and what are the features? I need these characteristics and features so that I can determine the maturity model here. Okay, so the features here, what I have done, I have put them in form of a question. But here the fixture is basically context is considered in designing, implementing, and assuring critical decisions. So to make life easier for you, I've turned this characteristic into a question so that immediately you can start go. And you have to understand that in enterprise risk management ISO 31000, there need to be someone who is constantly reporting on the framework and the process of risk management, and that is the role of a risk manager. As a risk manager, your job is basically to record this maturity model and also to complete this risk management process. So step number one, that is integration. The second concept that second principle is being structured and comprehensive. What should be structured and comprehensive in an organization? What should be structured and comprehensive is the risk management framework, is the risk management process. What should be structured and comprehensive here is basically the identification of opportunities and threats and the effective allocation of resources, which is this. Okay, so what exactly does it mean to be structured and comprehensive, and what are the characteristics? First of all, structured and comprehensive will help the organization create and protect value by having a systematic and a comprehensive structure. That means doing something according to plan. In this instance, identifying threats and opportunities according to plan or a pre-planned method. Being structured, being comprehensive, that means when you identifying your threats and opportunities, follow a process that is used throughout the organization. Those are the two factors. These are the two ways. This is the way that being structured and comprehensive is going to increase the likelihood of achieving those objectives. Now, as a risk manager, remember, you are here to look for the characteristics. You need to see these features being demonstrated and visible in the risk management framework and then the process. So it's very important that you know, how do I know whether the risk management framework and process is structured and comprehensive? That means there should be evidence that the decisions, they are made at the appropriate time. Okay, risk decisions, they are evaluated for effectiveness after they are implemented. The decision, they should be structured along a process, like a plan, do, check, and act. The guidelines, they have to be systematically applied at all levels, not only in one department. You understand? And risk decision-making criteria should be defined at the enterprise, the project, and the transactional or the product level. These are the features, the characteristics that you're going to need to see as a risk manager. So right now, I'm just giving you the list, and when we go to the framework and then the process, we are going to come back at these principles so that we can do what they've told us to do here. They say that these principles when establishing the risk management framework and processes, and these principles will enable an organization to manage the effects on uncertainty on its objectives. Okay, so the first thing before we go to the risk maturity model is to determine the characteristics. You have to know whether the principle has been applied or not. And whenever I say the principle is applied, it means that you look at how the organization is identifying its threats and opportunities and allocating resources for risk treatment. In other words, this is the definition of risk management. If someone asks you what is risk management, it's nothing but identification of threats and opportunities and effectively allocating resources for risk treatment. This is what DHL does, okay, or any organization. They look at an objective, what they want to achieve, step number one. Step number two, they're going to identify what can help them to achieve the objective and what can prevent them from achieving these objectives so that they can allocate the results for treatment. But when they are doing that, they need to follow the principles. We need to see the characteristic that process of risk management, is it effective and efficient? And that is what we are doing right here. Okay? And then with that being said, we go to the third principle, being customized. Okay? The risk management framework and process, that means when you are identifying your threats and opportunities, when you are identifying positive and negative factors that can affect your objective and allocating resources for risk treatment, you need to be tailored, adapted, and crafted to your organization in this context. What is this context? Well, this context now, for example, if you look at DHL here, they have a goal, and this goal exists in this environment. okay, under globalization, digitalization, e-commerce, and sustainability. This is now the environment or the context in which this goal has to be achieved in. They want to deliver digital excellence in globalization, digitalization, e-commerce, and sustainability. So that means when they are going to identify their threats and opportunities, it has to be confined and customized to this context like that. You understand? So that is being customized. It is specific, tailor-made. What are the characteristics or the features of a customized risk management process? First and foremost, the boundaries of the application of risk management have to be defined. In other words, the scope and the architecture and design of risk management framework should be tailored specifically to the context in which the objective exists. Okay, and this context of that organization should be fully understood, defined, so that the base of risk management can be tailored and can be customized. The critical and cultural behavioral elements such as risk appetite, they also have to be defined and understood, as you are going to see in the framework. So this is now the third principle. And when we are looking at these principles, again, let me just remind you to make sure that you got the idea. These principles, they are responsible for value creation and protection, okay? Which is, in other words, achieving the objectives. So, and these principles, what you have to do, if you just look for the word principle here, what exactly is a principle? A principle, this is the fundamental truth, okay, that serves as the foundation for a system or a behavior like that, okay? So these principles, they even exist in your organization, okay? These are like a fact, okay? Facts are stubborn. Whether you pay attention or you don't pay attention to the fact, it always remains true, okay? It's basically subjective. Like, it does not matter whether you know it or you don't know it. So even in your organization, these principles here, they are going to affect how you achieve your objectives, whether you like it or not. Because as I have told you, this is the fundamental basis which takes back to the 1920s when the VUCA model was first developed. Okay, ever since then, if you look at organizations like Apple, BlackBerry, the difference between those two companies, Apple and BlackBerry, you can really look at the principles that there was a mistake in implementing one of those principles in one of those organizations. Organizations, they exist, okay, they become leaders or they cease to exist depending on achieving the objectives, okay? So that is basically what happens in enterprise risk management. And with that being said, that's why even when I'm working on risk management projects, I just tell our clients that the best way to do this is just to go with ISO 31000, because once you embrace and understand how these principles work, that is almost 80% of risk management. Be inclusive, be customized, be structured and comprehensive, and be integrated. That is the easiest way just to make. After that, all what you need is a simple risk assessment, okay? With that risk assessment, that is going to serve as your process, and just make sure that this risk assessment, it follows the principles. That's it, case done. So the fourth principle here is being inclusive. What does it mean to be inclusive, and how does this help to increase the likelihood of achieving objectives? Being inclusive, it helps an organization having a common understanding of objectives and the risks that can inhibit meeting your objectives. For example, in your company or at your department, everyone who is working in that department or in that company should understand what is your objective. Why do you need to achieve this objective? How is it relevant? Not only that, but everyone should also have a level of awareness of what can help you as a department and organization to achieve this objective, or what can work against you in trying to achieve this objective. That is the common understanding and the inclusiveness that we are talking about. So how do you know whether the organization's risk management process and framework is inclusive? What are the characteristics? Basically, you have to check if the risk management framework and protocol are they clearly understood by everyone, okay? The stakeholders, customers, workers, and interested parties, are they considered in risk decision making, okay, in communication? Is everyone a risk owner, okay? Do they have a level of awareness or training in the management and control of risk? within the areas of responsibilities, the managers, the supervisors, and the team leaders. The other feature that you have to look are the risk authorities, accountabilities. Are they clearly defined at each level? So how everything here works is like this. You see, this is a principle of being inclusive. So I'm going to take you back here. So you come over here, okay? As a risk manager, what you have to do, you have to, so this is basically how these guidelines work. So as you can see here, okay? So what you do now, you understand that, okay, the organization, the framework and the process, they have to be inclusive. So that means, let's say you are going to look at design here. When you look at design, you are looking for evidence of these principles. And that is what you're going to do here. You come to design for the framework for managing risk, and then you're going to determine, is it embedded, is it optimized, and is it formalized like that. So for example, let's say you are looking at risk treatment here. Okay, you want to say risk treatment, is it inclusive, is it customized, structured, and integrated? You just come over here to the maturity model, and then you go to risk treatment, and then you record which one is there. So basically, if you're optimized, it means all the principles have been considered. If which of these statements basically is true depends on which principles are missing and which principles are available, because that is how you use ISO. Now, if you use the aspect one of the risk management practices, what are the risk management practices? These ones: designing, implementing, communicating, monitoring, risk assessment, risk treatment. You compare those practices with the internationally recognized benchmark, which is in form of principles, and these are the principles I'm showing you here. So these features, these are the ones that you use when you are comparing. Okay, that is what you do as a risk manager. So let's say if DHL, they are going to request you to write a risk management report, what are you going to do? When you are going to do, what you are going to do here at DHL is basically to look for these principles. You are going to compare how are they managing risk at DHL. You are going to see how are they identifying their threats and opportunities, and then you compare with the principles so that you can tell them whether they are embedded, they are optimized, they are underdeveloped, they are established. That is basically what you do. And this is going to help the organization to meet the principles so that they can get the concept and then the idea, which has been proven to work again and again like that. Okay? So in other words, when you are meeting these principles like being dynamic, the whole idea why these principles exist, okay? If you go back, the moment you have an objective, okay? So an objective can be this one, or you can say, I want to have $1 million in 2024. Let's say that is an objective you have. You want to have $1 million in your account. The moment you set that goal to have $1 million, there are 4 things that you have to pass through in order to reach that goal. In order to make $1 million, you need to deal with the unexpected challenges or the volatility. You need to deal with the uncertainty, the basic cause effect. You need to deal with the several unknowns, what you don't know, what you don't know. Okay. You also need to deal with the complexity of of reaching $1 million, the many interconnected parts and variables that you need. So in order for you that is the only way you can reach the goal. So this is now the same with organizations. If an organization has certain objectives like this, they have to go through these factors. So these principles that you are looking at right now here, these principles, basically what they do, they help you, okay, to increase the likelihood of meeting to address all of these 4 quadrants when you are identifying your threats and opportunities. That means when you reach your goal for $1 million, you become valuable. Okay, that is value creation, of course. So that is the same concept here. So you need to follow these principles and so on like that. So in organizations, these principles, they're basically designed with the concept of the VUC in case. And that is why you see when we are looking at these principles, like right now, we are looking at the principle of dynamic. This is one of the factors that you need to follow so that you can increase that likelihood of achieving the objectives. You increase the likelihood of achieving the objectives by addressing volatility, complexity, the VUCA. Okay? So that is what you're going to do. And then So right now we are at the factor number 5. And remember, your job as a risk manager is to look for those features like, okay, what we are currently doing, these risk management practices, what we are doing at an organization, are we following these principles or not? And that is how you are going to record it over here. So another factor here, another principle is being dynamic. Risk management should be dynamic, iterative, and respond to change. The context of the organization is continuously changing, okay? The objective can change, customer requirements can change, suppliers can change, okay, and so on like that. When anything changes in an organization, so should the process of the identification of threats and opportunities, so should be the allocation of resources, for risk treatment. So how do you know if the risk management process is dynamic? Okay, the risk management controls, they should be evaluated for effectiveness and efficiency. There should be sufficient review mechanisms to ensure that reliable and adequate decision making. So when you are trying to meet objectives, the risk management process should be sufficiently adaptable to changes in the context and the environment of the organization. Okay, there should be monitoring and review mechanisms to keep track of the key performance indicators and key risk indicators. So these are the characteristics and the features that you need to see as the risk manager, in order for you to confirm and certify that when I compared the risk management practices with the sound principles here, then this is what I found. Okay, so this is what we are going to be doing in the next section of this webinar. I'm going to show you how to use these principles so that you can determine the maturity model, and that is recording and reporting. Okay, in case there is any form of confusion or you are not really sure what exactly a risk manager does, I think I will tell you what a risk manager does not do. A risk manager does not mean that you are the person who has to treat every risk in an organization. Okay, first of all, risk treatment should not be allocated to one person. That is actually a feature of a poor organizational culture. Okay, basically what happens, a risk manager, your job is to report and report. Okay, so if you look at the risk management process here, you can see that what underpins risk management process here is basically recording and reporting. The idea is that your job as a risk manager, you have to raise awareness in form of a maturity model to inform the organization the result of your comparison between what they are doing and the principles. You just have to write your risk report and then you communicate to the top management, and from then they are going to cascade it down like what they have to do in integration so that this can be implemented and so on like that. Okay, so I want you to focus on risk reporting and risk recording. Whatever that you need to do in risk management, you just have to do through the manual. When you open this manual, you are going to see that there is a step-by-step procedure, how to evaluate risk, how to write risk reports, how to control assessment criteria. Everything that you need here is, you're just going to get it over like that. And even when you come to the risk management principles here, how to implement or how to go through the risk management process, the framework, and then the process, this information is not an issue. You are going to find it, and it's basically following procedures. But the skill that you need is, how can I record and report? And that is what you need this information for. So the sixth principle here is use of best available information. That means the risk management process of identifying threats and opportunities and allocating resources for risk treatment should use accurate, reliable, and sufficient information. Okay, how do you know that the information that was used in the risk management framework and process is, that is what you call the best available information? Well, the decision-making assumptions, they have to be validated by subject matter experts. There should be evidence, okay, and you should verify that the quality and accuracy and reliability of this information is evaluated, okay, and then also the decision-making process, does it consider the type of information to be gathered before we even make a decision? What kind of information we need, okay? And then also the context elements, they should be discussed and identified in terms of making what? the decisions. And also, whenever these decisions are made, they should be periodically revisited in form of audits, in form of monitoring, in form of checklists to ensure that critical issues, they are validated and they are updated. These are the characteristics of the best available information. And then now there is the human and cultural factors. Risk management requires new behaviors and attitudes that people may resist. Okay, what again? Risk management might involve people adopting and adapting to new management controls and other behavioral changes, because maybe your risk treatment plan, okay, and by the way, these are all the risk treatment plans that you have here. So you're going to see that when you let's say you're treating information security risk, you're going to see that this might require you to change the way you work. Or maybe it's a health and safety risk that you are going to treat. You might need to change your process flows. You might need to change your day-to-day activities, okay? So again, you have to consider people adopting, give them a chance to adopt and to adapt those new controls that you are going to do. So the features of a risk management process and framework that considers human and cultural factors, it includes, there should be evidence that accountabilities and responsibilities, they are clearly defined, okay? The top management should be directly involved in the architecture, design, and the implementation of the risk management plan or the risk management, the risk treatment solution. And also there should be a business case that has been developed, which is basically an explainer, with the problem statement, with the goals, with the objectives that you want to achieve, and also the benefits of those risk treatments that you have. That is how you should address the human and cultural factors. And then the last principle in risk management, the last factor that increases the likelihood of achieving objectives, or the last factor to be considered in creating and protecting value, is continual improvement. This is self-explanatory. Risk management should continually improve. The process of identifying threats and opportunities should not be stagnant. It should have strategic and tactical perspective. That focuses on continuously adapting, improving, and enhancing how you manage your risk. Okay, so how do you know that the risk management process and framework is continuously improving? Okay, there should be continuous improvement should be monitored. Okay, the top management, they should have specific accountabilities on continuous improvement, and also the key performance indicators and key risk indicators, they should be continuously revisited and being improved. So these are the 8 factors that increases the likelihood of achieving objectives, and these are the 8 factors for value creation and protection. So these principles now, okay, when you open your ISO 31000 standard, this is also what you need to do. You have to understand that you need these principles because that is the basis of value creation and protection. And these principles now, they basically give you the characteristics. That's how you know whether the process of identifying the risks and allocating results, is it efficient? Is it effective? Okay, is it being communicated? And so on in an organization. So these principles, again, they've given you a brief description on what are those principles like that. So again, you can just give an overview of what are those principles. For the features, you just come over here, the characteristics. These are the ones that you're going to need so that you can have so that you can implement in your organization. Now, what you're going to do now, we are now going to go to we will now go to the second aspect, okay, which is now the framework. So the best example that I was thinking of, okay, is like this. Okay, to remember, when we were in primary school, okay, we used to learn about this. I'm sure everyone, the seed germination process, okay? So I want to use this as an example to tell you, so that I can explain, okay, the concept of a framework, right? So I know that all of you understand the seed germination. When you plant a seed, okay, the germination process, okay, it needs water, oxygen, and proper temperature in order to germinate. So basically, that means the environment on which the seed is going to germinate, those conditions should be there. Okay. For example, which diagram can I take? Like this one. Okay. There should be enough oxygen. There should be enough water. That means the environment. Those are the preconditions that you need so that the seed can germinate. How is this similar to risk management? This is similar to risk management like this. When you are looking at this framework, this is the oxygen, the temperature, and the nutrients, and the moisture that is required in order for this seed, the process to take place in. You understand? In order for this risk management process, okay, to exist in your organization, for this seed to germinate, you need these conditions, the framework. So this framework right here, okay, in order for this to happen, in order for your organization to identify opportunities and threats and to allocate resources for risk treatment, you need a framework. The framework is going to act as a prerequisite for the conditions that are conducive so that this process can take place. Okay, so how it does that? Well, it does that by considering these principles in the design, implementing, evaluating, improving, and integration. This risk management framework is basically the link that is going to connect the principles and then the process. Okay, so in this risk management framework, you are going to get information or guidelines on how to design. What are you designing here? You are designing the process. What are you designing? You are designing the identification of opportunities and threats. You are designing how are you going to allocate those for risk treatment, and this is what you are designing. We are going to go to the implementation. The framework here is going to show you how to implement. To implement what? To implement this process. To implement what? To implement the identification of opportunities and threats and allocation of resources for risk treatment. You see? So that is now the framework. So if we come over here, okay, and then we go to the framework. So you can see the purpose of the risk management framework is to assist the organization in integrating risk management into significant activities and functions. Remember, what did we say? What is risk management? Risk management is the identification of opportunities and threats and effective allocation of resources for risk treatment. So in order to give you the necessary conditions, the conducive conditions, the prerequisite for this process to take place, that's it, to germinate, you need the risk management framework. And whether this framework has been implemented or has been done correctly or not, that is what you're going to look at here. The framework consists of leadership and commitment, design, implementing, monitoring, and continually improving. We are going to be looking for evidence of those principles so that we can determine if indeed value is being created and protected here. We are going to compare those risk management practices, those sub elements in the framework, so that we can determine. We are going to compare with them with the principles so that we determine if we are creating or protecting value here. So that is the risk management framework. So the reason why I gave you the example of the conditions is because when people try to implement risk management in their organizations, they are looking for a system like, okay, what can we do and things like that. But really, in reality, what you have to do, okay, the only thing that you have to do here, you have to identify the threats and opportunities for risk treatment and allocate resources for risk treatment. The only two other things you have to do is to follow the principles and make sure that there is a framework in place. Okay, so in other words, risk management is basically this diagram that you see here. But for this diagram now to meet international best practice, it has to follow the principles, and it should be based on a framework which is going to help it integrate it into your organization. Okay, so we are now going to look at the risk management framework. So as per the explanation, I hope the example I gave you for seed germination shed more light on the role of these principles. And those are other points that can help you. The framework is going to promote a systematic monitoring of risk. It's going to communicate the value of risk management, help you recognize and address all your obligations. It's going to ensure that risk management framework remains appropriate, and all of this is under the accountability of top management for leadership and commitment. So right now, what do you do as a risk manager? As a risk manager here, you have one job. As a risk manager, you have to look at the risk management practices. What are the risk management practices in this scenario? Here now, the risk management practices, they include design, implementation, evaluation, and improvement. When you are going to look at them, you are going to compare, okay, with the risk management principles, and then your findings, they are going to come over here, okay, like that. So that is basically what you do. So we are going to start off now by looking at the leadership and commitment aspect. This is the critical component of the risk management framework. And remember, the risk management framework, this is basically the how you can take these principles to integrate them into your organization. So when you are determining the maturity model here, you have to look at the alignment of risk management with overall objectives. You have to check if the organization did they issue statements, okay, under leadership and commitment. What you're looking at here, these are the features of this risk management practice. Under leadership and commitment, the organization is expected to align risk management with objectives, issue statements and announcements, make sure resources are adequately allocated, and to determine the risk appetite. Okay? So for you now as a risk manager, you come over here, and then you have to determine, number one, which statement here is true. So let us say, for example, this is formalized, and then maybe the statement here is there's a documented risk management policy that has been developed for the organization and has been communicated to all staff with the endorsement of senior management. So let me just copy this one for you so that I can give you the example of what is happening. So let's say under risk management, this is now what you need here. So if you have under leadership and commitment, okay, so let's say your risk management here is what, this is the risk management that you have, this is formalized. So if it is formalized, a documented risk management policy has been developed for the business unit and has been communicated to all staff with the endorsement of senior management. You can say, yes, this is it because the risk management process has been communicated. There is evidence of inclusiveness. It has been endorsed by the top management. There's evidence of what? Of integration and so on like that, okay? That is the reason why it is here. But however, for it to be formal, to be established, to be embedded, and to be optimized, then these are the other risk management principles that have to be that have to be included like that. So that is basically how you that is basically how you compare the risk management practice with an internationally recognized benchmark, and that is how you record and report. And if this seems like it's a daunting task, what you can do, this is actually done in form of a group discussion. So, it's very rare that you are going to have, it's very rare that you're going to have, you're going to have any troubles here, because if there are 3 or 4 people, basically you're going to be giving reasons why exactly do you regard it? Is it at level 2, level 3, like that? This is basically a game of, let me show you like this. So what you're going to do, you are basically going to be spotting the difference, okay? So when I say spotting the difference, okay, in other words, you are going to be looking at the risk management principles and the risk management framework in the organization, or the risk management practices, and then the difference, that is what you're going to record in form of this maturity model here. So what I'm going to do in this presentation, I'm going to show you where to look at when you are determining that principle. Where do you have to look for evidence of these principles being established like that? So hopefully that is also going to help you. And then after that, we are going to look at the design. So design, this is now the first component of the risk management framework. What exactly is being designed here? What is being designed is basically the risk management framework, the risk management process. What is being designed is this. What is being designed is the identification of opportunities and threats, and effectively allocation of the resources for risk treatment. This is what is being designed. Okay, so the components under design, they are going to include the understanding, okay, or defining of the context of the organization under which we are going to identify these threats and opportunities, and also the planning and allocating of resources, what is going to be done at each stage of the risk management process, and also how are we going to communicate at each stage as we go on. So again, under design, you come over here and then you measure the maturity model for this section here. So let's say, for example, you see that this is underdeveloped. Responsibility for risk management is not established. This can be because there is no human and cultural factors, and there is no provision of risk management activities in the organization's budget. That is a problem with integration, okay? So that is basically what you're going to tell them, that, okay, right now there's evidence of being underdeveloped, and the action plan should consist of how to be formalized, how to be established, how to be embedded, and then how to be what? How to be optimized like that. In this case now, what you are basically doing as a risk manager, you are helping the organization to meet the principles, and consequently, that is going to help them increase the likelihood of achieving the objectives, and that is also going to help them create and protect value. Always remember, you only create and protect value if you follow the principles. So what we are doing right here, all this comparison, spotting the difference, we are basically looking for evidence whether or not these principles have they been considered. Why should we care about the principles? Because the principles, they provide the fundamental truth, something that will always hold true no matter what. So all these risk management activities, what the organization is doing in their framework and their process, we have to look for evidence of those principles. Basically, we are going to spot the difference. Spot the difference, that means we are going to be looking for the what? For the characteristics as you see here. Okay? In risk management principles, you say we are looking for these characteristics. So these are the characteristics that we need to see under what? Here in design and development. And then whether if we don't see these characteristics, we are underdeveloped. If we see them, then that is being optimized like that. So after being designed, and then we are going to see the implementation. Implementation, that means putting the plans in action, okay? That means implementation, we are going to be implementing the risk management process. When you are looking at this, okay, what you're looking at right now, this is the same as this one right here. Okay, let me just show you this here. So this is called the risk management process. So this, okay, is the same as this. Okay, and it's also the same as what? And it is also the same as this. Okay, this is the same thing. So when we are saying implementation, we want to implement the identification of opportunities and threats and how we will allocate resources for risk treatment. Okay, we would like to implement this here, and we would also like to implement this. It is literally the same thing, just the presentation is different. So that means that is the implementation. So this component includes, when you are looking for evidence of those characteristics for the principles, you have to look at, okay, when they implemented, did they set objectives? Did they clearly define the decision-making process? And also, are they evaluating and making changes in risk decision? And then here, the implementation, you come over here. When you come to implementing risk management, you start spotting the difference. You start comparing what they are doing. You start comparing the risk management practice of implementing with the internationally recognized benchmark, which is in form of the principles. And then that is how you are going to determine the maturity level here. The maturity level, basically, is an indication of the extent of the principles, how are they being applied. For example, if you can see here that, under established, the risk management is supported and anchored by senior management with authority to influence the business culture. And then you can see here, risk management training is proactively provided for those individuals. Risk management training, that is an example of being inclusive. So if you come back here, you can see that under inclusive, we asked, is everyone being trained in the management and control of this risk within their responsibilities? So my point here is that what you're going to do here, when we look at this maturity model, it's basically an exercise to determine the extent of application of these principles that you see. And then after implementation, okay, after implementation, we now need to what? We need to evaluate. Okay, so what is evaluation? And what will be evaluated here? So what is going to be evaluated here, ladies and gentlemen, is basically the risk management process. What is going to be evaluated is the identification of opportunities and threats, okay? And what is going to be evaluated is this. And this is going to be evaluated because in the risk management framework here, as you can see, we have a step of evaluation, okay? We have looked at design, implementation, and then evaluation. So after that, now we come over here, and then we go to evaluation. Under evaluation, what exactly is being done here? We are taking a look at what's working and what is not working. Okay, so that means we have to look at the perceived versus the desired outcome. Okay, what was the perceived outcome? The perceived outcome was the creation and protection of value, and then what is in reality, that is what you need to do. So this is going to include measuring the performance of risk management, assessing the success rate, and determining whether or not the objectives are feasible. So again, at this point, you know the drill. When you look at evaluation, you need to see how this has been monitored and reviewed. Okay, and then if there's no review of the effectiveness of the risk management activity, that is an example of the absence of the principle of continual improvement. Okay, and then if you see that an integrated risk assurance model is in place, that is an example of being structured and comprehensive with clear roles and responsibilities. That is an example of human and cultural factors. With the criteria established, that is an example of being customized. Okay, so again, these are the things that you have to see. Just understand that what you'll be doing right here is basically a measurement of the extent of application of these risk management principles. So after being here, we are going to see that after evaluation now, we have to improve. So another way to understand the risk management framework here is you can view it as the plan, do, check, and act cycle. You plan, design, do, implement, check, evaluate, and then act on improvement. Okay, the PDCA. And then after it has been a tried and tested method, and then you can integrate into your organization, into your day-to-day activities. So after evaluation, of course, we have to improve. Okay, so under improvement now, we are doing this because risk management, as you know, is a cyclic and a continuous approach. Okay, we want to improve the risk management process. We want to improve how we identify the threats and opportunities. So the components here, they are going to include that, they are going to be continuous. We will look at how they continuously monitor all aspects of risk management, how they address internal and external issues, and how they plan and take actions to improve value creation within the risk management. And of course, when you look at these sections, the other thing that you do, you just have to come over here as a group discussion. You first of all identify which statement is true in your organization. Once you do that, and then you help the organization by listing down the other principles which are not there, and then the statements are here. You tell them that the next 2 steps is to do 1 and then to do number 2. How to do it? Basically here, improvement opportunity, they are highlighted. That means they have to follow the principle of continual improvement. Improvements, they are formally monitored over time. You tell them you have to follow the principle of using best available information. So each of these principles and the purpose, the guidance on how to do it. And your job as a risk manager is to record and report. So after improvement now, at this stage now, you have a tried and tested method. That is when you are going to integrate it. Remember, we said risk management, okay? The framework is going to help you to integrate the risk management into your day-to-day activities, but you just don't start integrating it in your organization. First of all, you have to design it, you implement your risk management process, you evaluate it, okay, to see what's not working and what is working, you improve it. After it has been tried and tested, that is when you start integrating it. And that is when this process is going to start happening. This is when you are going to assist your organization to integrate the risk management into significant activities. This can only be done after design, implementation, evaluation, and improvement of this risk management process. Okay, so the integration now, you can see this is perhaps the second most important, only to leadership and commitment, and the effectiveness of your entire risk management will depend on how extensively did you plan, do, check, and acted upon it. So here now, at this stage now, you are going to look at the risk management process, and then you are going to assign roles and responsibilities, and that is when you are going to assign it to make sure that it is being integrated. At that point, this is now going to become your formal risk management process. This is going to become the way you identify your threats and opportunities. And at this stage, you know that what you are looking at in the diagram right now, this process, it considers all the principles, and also it is based on a risk management framework. Now what is left now is to go through the process. So this is, as you can see now, your process at this point, when you start, that's why we say you are going to improve the identification. You are going to improve the identification of your threats and opportunities because you are following the principles and you are based on a what? On a process. And then that is what is going to happen right here. Okay? So this now, the risk management process, basically how it works, okay, is the same as the example I gave you when we started the webinar. We said the risk management process, this is, first of all, the organization, they identify an objective. We want to deliver excellence in a digital world. Once this objective has been identified, what is the next thing? The next thing is to look at the risk management categories to determine what are the, okay, we said what are the opportunities. Opportunities, simply put here, of course, this is going to depend on the risk appetite. But what can result in insignificant, what can help us to have compliance with all applicable legal instruments? What can help us to have zero to insignificant negative impacts? What can help us to to make sure that the organization operations are not affected? What opportunities or what can help us to absorb any impact into financial risk, and what can also help us to prevent reputational risk? And then also at the same time, they have to look at the threats, okay? Threats to this objective relevant to what? To these risk categories. That means what can result in extreme risk like this. That is the risk management process that you're going to look at. That is this process here. But as you know, this process, for this process to be able to be effective and for this process to help you get and protect value, you have to follow the principles, and it has to be based on the what? It has to be based on the risk management framework. So for those who have this process in your organization, no problem. What you just have to do is to look for evidence of the risk management principles in the process you are currently using. For those that don't have, not an issue. I'm going to show you how to develop it from scratch. So this is the risk management process. As you can see, it has got continuous, and also there are continuous processes, and there are other one-time processes that you have to do. So I'm going to show you how to communicate and consult, how to review and monitor, and then also how to record and report, which is what you've been doing throughout this webinar. So at this point, let me also give you, okay, to summarize the, okay, this is our website. What has happened? We have a link here. Where can I get this link? 1 minute. We have a link that I can give you, okay, so that you can follow, which is basically a description of this risk management process, okay? I'm going to look for that blog later on. So what you're going to do now, this is now what you're looking at this process. This one right here, as I said, is the same as this, okay? And it's basically this statement right here, which is risk management. So we are going to start by looking at the what? We'll start at the scope, context, and then the criteria. So what do you have to do here? In the scope context and criteria, this is now the first step of customizing. So the number one thing you have to do is to be clear about the scope under consideration for the relevant objective. Okay. You also have to determine the internal and external context. That means you have to look at what are the threats, the positive and negative factors that can affect you. Like what we did under, we said the internal and external context under legal, environmental, operational, reputational, and financial. And also you have to define the risk criteria, like, what is extreme risk, what is low risk. I'm going to show you the example there. Your job now as a risk manager here is to verify, okay, and to record how the organization has established the external, internal, and risk management context in which the rest of the process will take place. So the reference to these risk categories, like I've shown, we have displayed under legal, regulatory, and requirements. That is what you have to do. So you just come over here, and then let us see how you determine the step and the context. So this is now what you do. First of all, you just have to write, what is the date, the risk owner, and then also the business area that is being affected. So this can be operations, let's say operations department. The risk type, let's say in this case, this is basically a risk in operation, okay? And then the category risk, this can be, let's say, extreme. And the summary or the commentary here, it can be something as simple as the organization may, due to a cybersecurity attack or breaching data, the organization cannot operate at one or more locations for more than a year. Okay, for any reason, this can be a fire, it can be an accident, or let's say there's a risk that there can be a non-compliance that might result in organizations ceasing to operate for more than 1 year. Or there's a risk that there's sustained negative media attention at a national, international level that can last for more than 3 days. So that is just an example of what you have to do in step number 1 out of 3. But once this has been done now, you have to come over here. Okay? As you all know, we have to consider these principles. Okay? So this is where we are. We are at the scope, context, and criteria. So after the scope, context, and criteria has been done, how do you determine if this actually is considered the principles and the framework? And then you come over here and then you ask these questions. You check if in determining the context, did you consider both threats and opportunities? This context, is it regularly reviewed to ensure it remains appropriate? And if these objectives of individual projects been considered as part of risk management, managing the context, okay? So once you ask these questions, that is going to help you determine the maturity model right here under the context, okay? Whether the business unit has no policies or maybe they're optimized, that means the policies and procedures and the detail that risk information is expected, and so on like that. So the idea here, what I want you to understand is that everything moves and everything stops with the principles. So everything, the rest of the guidelines, what we are going to do is basically a comparison. We are going to compare what an organization is doing versus these principles, and then you have to record your findings right here. So the idea is for you to understand what needs to be done, and also what do I have to look at in order to determine the context. So that is what we have here in step number 1 out of 3. After determining the context now, the second step is going to be risk identification. Now, in risk identification, the first thing that you have to do here is to understand that risk identification is not about looking for threats. Risk identification is both threats and opportunities. That means the purpose of risk identification is to find and recognize risks, what can help or what can prevent an organization in achieving its objectives. That means you are going to look at the scope, context, and the risk criteria, and then you determine what can result in insignificant risk and what can result in extreme risk. So that is risk identification. So this risk identification, please, you open your risk manual here, and then you come to we have risk identification techniques right here. Okay, you are going to see there are different techniques that you can use to identify risk. That includes interviews. You can use SWOT analysis and so on. all those tools, you can get them there. But for you as a risk manager, remember, your job here is to record and report on the risk identification of the organization. So the questions that you need to be answered is the organization should know where they're experiencing loss, what keeps them up at night. They should know, is there a clear risk owner? They should know the areas that risk could impact. They should define and the cause and consequence and so on like that. In other words, you as a risk owner, you need to see the organization identify where, when, why, and how events could prevent, delay, or enhance the achievement of objectives. That is exactly what you're going to be looking at here. So how is risk identified? I'm going to show you an example here. So, and everything that you're doing here, we designed it using the framework. So we are going to come over here under identify. So in identify now, we have risk description. Okay, so here now you have to provide a brief but clear description of risk. For example, this is an organization that they have an enterprise model. So the enterprise model, like the one they use for KFC, McDonald's, the normal franchise model, like they allow other organizations in other countries to use their name and so on like that. So how did they identify risk here? They said there is a risk of poor partner management. Okay, they said there is a risk that an ad hoc approach is taken in developing global presence. So why should they care? Here you should give the consequences. Okay, you need to provide a description of what impact the risk will result in. So poor partner management will result in a negative impact on the brand and position in different countries, and also negatively impacting financial performance. So that is the one, that is the risk here. And as you can see under these categories, this is it's a reputational and a financial risk. Okay, so that is now the example there. So once you see the organization, after this step has been completed, if this section has been completed, you have to ask these questions right here. Why are you asking these questions? Because when you are using ISO 31000, you have to compare. You have to spot the difference between the principles and the risk management practice. So in this instance now, you have to check, are these risks, are they identified in reference to operational plans? Do you consider both internal and external risk? Okay. Do you identify both threats and challenges? Okay, and so on like that. And why do you think that, they have to address internal and external risk? Because this is the principle of being customized. If you come over here under customized, you can see that, the context of the organization, this is what you're talking about, okay? The boundaries, are they being considered, and so on like that. So once you ask these questions under what? After risk identification, and then of course that is going to help you to report your findings here. Okay, the idea is just for you to inform the organization. If let's say DHL, they want a risk management report, what they are looking at, what they need is basically the results of when you compare what they are doing in an organization, when you compare it versus the internationally recognized benchmark, which is the form of principles, what do you have? And that is the maturity model that you have here. Okay. And then after identifying these risks, you now have to analyze. So risk analysis, what you're doing here, you are trying to establish the cause, the risk, and then the cause. Okay? You need to provide a good insight of the risk causes. In other words, under risk analysis, you need to analyze identified risks to determine the level of inherent risk. You need to identify and evaluate existing controls. Okay? You also need to revise the likelihood and impact ratings to gauge the level of residual risk. How is risk analyzed? Okay, we are going to continue with the same example. You analyze risk now. Basically, you need to give the reason why would this risk occur. That means you input the key drivers that will result in the risk. Why do you say this risk can be realized? Why do you think the risk for our reputational and financial risk can be realized? That is the risk and then the cause. So here there's a risk of poor partner management, and this can result because of the strategy and drive to grow international revenue without a clear partner management and process, okay, which causes an ad hoc approach to expand global presence. In other words, they are saying we have a risk that, other organizations, they cannot uphold the same standards we have because we don't have a clear process of due diligence. We don't have a clear process to manage these other organizations like that, because we are more concerned with growing revenue rather than quality control and standards being upheld like that. So again, once this has been done, you have to come over to this list. Are these risks analyzed using a consent methodology? Why are you asking this? Okay, this question you are asking it because you want to determine if the principle of being structured and comprehensive is being followed. Okay, that's why you say systematic is doing something according to plan, and this process has to be used throughout the organization. And that is the principle that has to be considered here, and that's why you see it like this. Okay, and then does the organization conduct appropriate analysis of the nature and extent of these impact like that? Why are you asking that question? Because you are looking for evidence of best available information. Is this validated by subject matter experts? Okay, and then also you see, like, are you using accurate and reliable and sufficient information in your risk analysis? So that's why we have listed down these questions here, so that for you it's going to be much more easier to compare. For you it's going to be much more easier to spot the difference once you just look for this evidence, and then that is going to help you to position the maturity model right here. So after risk analysis, now it has to be evaluated, and you're going to evaluate you evaluate the risk evaluation to support your decision, and this actually involves comparing the results of risk analysis with the established risk criteria to determine where additional action is required. Okay, in risk evaluation, this is basically comparing the level of risk found during analysis. In risk analysis, you established the risk and the risk and then the cause. Now here you need to also to determine the residual risk. You need to consider what can we do in order to pursue this risk, and how do you evaluate risk? You evaluate risk by in two steps. First of all, you have to determine if detail any control mitigations in place that will reduce the risk. In other words, here you have to look for controls. Okay, what do we currently have in our operational controls that is going to prevent this from happening? And in this instance, there was none. So as per the risk exposure matrix, the likelihood and the consequence, that means the risk is high here. Okay, and this is again one of the case studies that you're going to get alongside your materials. That's when you can see the maturity model for this case study. So this is the risk evaluation. And then again, after risk evaluation, you have to ask these questions here. Are these risks prioritized to ensure treatment of the highest risk is considered first? Are they re-evaluated over time? Are these risks reviewed and evaluated as part of strategic and operational planning processes? All of these questions and this kind of information, you are basically looking for evidence that this risk management practice of risk evaluation, this step, did it follow the framework, and is there evidence that the relevant principles here, are they being considered? Okay, because you know that whether this objective or that uncertainty is going to be increased or reduced based on the principles. That's why we always have to look at the principles. So as you can see, the principles now, they make everything easier. Because if you look at the white paper produced, if you read the white paper which was published by ISO when they developed this standard, they said they want to make risk management simple and easy to use for everyone. Okay, so one of the ways they did that was to make sure that they lay down the principles. Once they lay down the principles in risk management, this is the fundamental truth. Basically, there is no gray area here. It's either you follow the principles, and that's how you reduce uncertainty on meeting objectives. You don't follow the principles, you don't create product value. It's as simple as that. So with that being said, everything that you do in your organization, your risk treatment, evaluation, analysis, and so on, it has to incorporate and include those principles. In that way now, all what you are left to do is to compare what you are doing to the principles, and then you record. After recording, and then it comes the action plan, okay? And then also there is the risk treatment. The purpose of risk treatment is to select and implement the options for addressing the risk. For risk treatment now, for you now, this is now the module that you're going to get, okay? So for example, this case study that you're using here, there's a risk of brand reputation and financial performance. So if you are treating risks here, you just have to come over here. You see the case studies in brand risk management, and then also the treatment in financial risk, okay? So for example, let's say in DHL here, there's a risk for operational. You just come over here, and then you go to the operational case studies, and then you see how this risk was treated. So that is what is happening here. So this risk treatment, the idea behind treating risk is to develop and implement a specific strategy and controls and these actions to pursue or mitigate the risk. The risk treatment section is this one, okay? This is when you allocate your what? You allocate your resources for risk treatment. And of course, you can only effectively do that by following the principles, okay? The principles here, they are going to help you increase the likelihood, they are going to improve the framework, and then they are also going to increase effectiveness on your risk treatment solutions and treatments like that. So as you can see here now, risk is treated in this way. So here now, risk treatment, that means they decided to treat this risk because it's too high for them. And then they said what you're going to do, you have to input any planned mitigations that will further reduce the risk. So if you have got any risk, let's say it's health and safety risk, it's environmental, it's supply chain, it's strategic, or it's human capital. Here are the case studies that you're going to see. These case studies, they are going to show you what other organizations or what is the current best practice to deal with that particular risk. And here now, okay, these organizations, they've designed and developed new global partnership lifecycle. Okay, basically they are going to have a new framework on how can we manage, how can we manage the people or the organizations who have got the franchise. Okay, they're going to gain approval, executive approval, and assign development to each staff member so that they can create and develop an implementation plan. They allocate the responsibilities, and this falls within their risk appetite. They, after cost and benefit analysis, they can manage medium risk for brand reputation and financial risk. So that is the risk treatment. Once that is done, so if in your organization, if you have treated some risks, so if you have got a complete risk assessment process like this one, you can just come over here to these questions to determine if indeed you consider the principles and in your organization. That means check, did you treat this risk with a predetermined risk criteria? That is basically the concept of being structured and comprehensive. This risk treatment, does it include cost-benefit analysis? That means best available information. In managing these risks and associated controls to particular officers or individuals in your organization, that is human and cultural factors, do you have a formal and documented contingency plans for disaster recovery and business continuity that is being integrated? Do you regularly review and test your risk controls? That is continual improvement. Are internal controls developed and documented to treat these risks? That is basically also the principle of how do you continuously monitor so that it can be customized, and then also that is also going to generate the principle of best available information. And for risk treatment, the responses that you get from here, you are going to come over, and then you can see this is the risk treatment here. So you determine which statement is true. So for example, you can say, okay, risk treatment plans are in place for key risks only, okay, and selection of treatment is based on judgment. So for example, if this is the case in your organization, I'll just give you an example here. Okay, so if you have this one, risk treatment plans are in place for key risks only. Okay, what does it mean? It means that there's no evidence. You have said so because there's no evidence of being integrated here. Okay, that means this risk is not cascaded down the organization. And selection of risk treatment plan is based on judgment. That means you are not using, there's evidence that the organization is not used what? They are not using best available information. So when you do like that now, after that statement, you now help the organization to consider these principles so that they can allocate these resources for risk treatment like that. Okay. So after risk treatment, okay, we are now going to look at what? We'll now look at communication and consultation like that. So the communication and consultation, this is a continuous process. Why do you communicate and consult? You communicate and consult so that you can assist the relevant stakeholders in understanding the risk, okay? You communicate and consult because this is also the principle of being inclusive. As you can see here, there should be a common understanding of the objectives and the risks that can inhibit meeting these objectives. So how do you create this inclusiveness, this common understanding for a risk management process? That is what you're going to deliver through what? Communication and consultation. So in communication and consultation, you have to, what you are communicating and consulting is basically everything here at each step. That means when you determine the context, you have to communicate and consult. When you identify risk, analyze, evaluate, and treat it, you have to communicate and consult. So that is done, of course, using a communication plan. So you have to determine who are the risk stakeholders, who needs this information, what exactly, what kind of information they need, what is the communication and reporting process. Are you going to communicate via email, in board meetings? Are you going to do in a memo, or you are going to do as workshops? When are you going to notify them of the frequency? Are you going to notify them monthly, quarterly, or annually? Okay. And then also, how are you going to evaluate the effectiveness? How are you going to determine if indeed this information has been received as you intended to? So communication, again, this is a continuous process where you need to monitor and review the effectiveness of all the steps. Each step in the risk management process, everything that you do when you're identifying your threats and opportunities and allocating resources for risk treatment, you have to communicate and consult with your internal and external stakeholders. And then how do you know if you have considered all the principles here? You check if the staff are they aware of their responsibilities. That is the principle of human and cultural factors. Are all stakeholders consulted throughout the risk management cycle? That is best available information. Where appropriate, is a communication plan developed that is being inclusive? Okay. Does the organization risk management framework promote continuous improvement? That is, of course, the principle of continual improvement. So once it has been like this, you don't have to go and start digging which principles I have to apply. All what you need to do is to look for evidence for these questions here, and then you come over here to communication and consultation, and then you are going to see something like this, okay? So it can be one risk management communication plan is developed for the whole organization, and both addresses both internal and external communications. That is basically because, there is no customization. You have to do it for different departments and so on like that. Or maybe sometimes you can see there are no guidelines in place for risk management communication. That means there is no evidence of what inclusiveness and so on like that. So the whole thing here, again, as we come to the end of the webinar, is just for you to understand that, okay, in risk management, okay, everything here moves and stops by the principles. So whatever that you do when you are managing risk in an organization, it has to follow the principles of risk management. So these principles, there should be evidence of the application in these risk management practices. When you look at the framework and at the process, your job is to inform the organization whether these principles are being applied or not. If they are applied, then that means there's a high chance of achieving the objectives. If not, then there is none like that. Okay. And then another continuous process is to monitor and review. Monitoring and review, this is now the feedback loop from the risk management process to the risk management framework. The purpose of monitoring and review is to assure and improve the quality and effectiveness of the risk management framework. Okay, like this. As you can see here, there's an arrow that is coming from the process to the framework. So as you can see here, we said we are going to evaluate. So that is what is happening here. We need to do the process design implementation, and this is the process design and implementation here. Okay, so that is the step that we're going to do here under monitoring and reviewing. Basically, here we are looking at whether we want to monitor and review the effectiveness of all the steps that we take in the risk management process. That means the risk identification, the risk analysis, evaluation, and treatment. We have to monitor for effectiveness to look at what is working and what is not working. Okay, so again here you are basically monitoring and recording on all these risks and treatment of effectiveness. So that means when you want to evaluate the maturity level here, you have to consider that the organization, do they have a process that evaluates the relevant risks and achievement of the objectives, the effectiveness of their governance controls, okay, the effectiveness to evaluate the application of these treatment plans, and to continuously determine or review the relevance of risk treatment plans. Again, once you do the monitoring, when you look for evidence of monitoring and reviewing, this is now what you're going to do. So you're going to see that most of the times, the first thing that you have to do here when you are recording the risk maturity model, you only have to mark here, okay? You just have to, you can just do like color coding. These things, they are very simple. So here you can say, I'm going to put amber here, and here it will be green or something like that. So if the maturity level here for monitoring and reviewing, if it is established, you can just highlight this area like that. And then in the action plan that I'm going to show you later on, that is when you are going to give them, the guidance and what to follow so that they can be, embedded and also be optimized. Okay. And then now that you have to do is to record and report. So all of this webinar, actually, it focused on recording and reporting. So recording and reporting, it's basically basically a completed risk maturity model and also a completed risk management risk management process like this. So these are the two things that you're going to want to attach, and then you send it as a risk management report, and that is going to be a report to the board of directors. To sometimes in other jurisdictions, it's a legal requirement for you to have a risk maturity, a risk management report. You should also report to keep up to date the stakeholders on your achievement of objectives. Whenever we say achievement of objectives here, okay, these are the objectives you're talking about, and that means value, creation and protection. Okay, so you just have to understand that the reason why we need a risk management guidelines is because we want to increase the likelihood of achieving this objective. And in order for us to achieve this objective, whatever that we do in identifying the threats and opportunities and allocating resources towards this objective, it has to follow the enterprise, the risk management guidelines. So that is exactly what you have to be doing. Okay. So that being said, now that brings me to the end of this webinar. So once again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with me. I really, really appreciate you taking that time. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. Other than that, if you check your email inbox, if you'd like to receive the webinar recording and also the resources that are going to come over here, this is the payment link that you have to do. You can pay using any card in any currency. Your bank will do the conversion. For $49, you are going to receive the Enterprise Risk Management Manual. Okay. You are also going to receive the risk treatment options, and then also you are going to get this course bundle like that for Enterprise Risk Management. Okay. Of course, this is a CPD approved training program, and here is a link that you can follow so that you can verify the authenticity of your certificate and credentials that you're going to receive. Okay, so once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending. Until next time. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so for these other resources, for those who have already processed their payments, what you can do, please just wait. Okay, 20 30, 15 minutes after processing your payment, you're going to receive a link that you can actually access all these materials. Or you can just check your email inbox. You go to the just go to the email that you received. I'm sure our team, they've included some links that you can follow so that you can get access to the free trial and see what you're going to receive from here. Other than that, thank you so much. Goodbye. Okay, so in order to receive this presentation, and then these slides plus the webinar recording, that is done through the payment. Okay, once you pay $49 only, you're going to get the recording of this webinar, and you also get all these resources. Please check your email inbox. Our team, they've communicated all this information to you. Okay, so thank you so much. Until next time, goodbye, guys. Thank you.